time to shake the dust off and begin.
Hey everybody, welcome to Shift Your Story. It's your host, Lucy Price. Let's get started.
Today we are talking about jealousy. How to stop being jealous, why jealousy comes up, what jealousy actually is. And there's going to be a couple parts to this podcast today. This podcast within itself could be an entire workshop. So definitely take everything in. But if you have the opportunity to take notes, I would definitely recommend coming back to this episode and taking notes, because there's just so much in here that maybe I will take it and turn it into a workshop one day. But in and of itself, it is it's going to be very helpful. Let's just put it that way. It's going to be very, very helpful for you. So we're going to start off by talking about what jealousy is, the common feelings underneath the jealousy, and then lastly, we'll get into how to stop feeling jealous. So the first part is, what is jealousy? What is it actually? Why does it come up? And at its basic form, jealousy is an emotion. It's just an emotion. It's energy emotion. It's mixtures of emotions. And emotions are neither good nor bad. They just are. It's what we do with those emotions that matter. And we can get into the whole nature versus nurture debate around jealousy. Are we born with it or do we learn it? But I think it's both a natural thing and it's also a learned behavior. I think as people, we do have our lizard brain and it feels fear. Our brain feels fear. It feels scarcity because we have this drive to survive. And to some degree, we view relationships or community or love as a resource. But I do also think that in society teaches us to be jealous in a lot of ways. We're supposed to be jealous when there's a guy talking to her girlfriend at the bar, or a woman goes out with another man to make her partner jealous and want to get her back. And then there's the age-old classic love triangle in Hollywood where two people are fighting over one person. And there's just so much jealousy baked into that I really firmly don't believe is healthy. So jealousy can be viewed as a natural thing within us. It could be viewed as something we learn. But either way, no matter which way you slice and dice it, I think everybody at some point has experienced jealousy. And jealousy can come up when we least expect it. Jealousy can come up around a lot of things. It doesn't have to be just around people. It can be around hobbies, lifestyle. It can be comparing your life to another person, whatever that is. I think jealousy leads us to create a lot of stories about who we are in the world and what we think we deserve or can have or can't have in comparison to other people. Throughout this podcast, there are going to be a couple of books that I reference. There are two books I found in particular that have been very helpful when it comes to talking about jealousy and talking about jealousy in various contexts, not just romantic relationships, or what I view to be not just as romantic relationships. And these books are, the first book is Opening Up, A Guide to Creating a Sustainable Open Relationship by Tristan Taormino, something like that. And then the second book is More Than Two by E. Rickard and Franklin Vo. Now, yes, these are both books centered around open relationships and polyamory. That doesn't have to apply to you. There are so many good nuggets in those books when it comes to boundaries, communication, jealousy, feelings, navigating fear, so many gems that I would recommend it to you regardless of whether you want an open relationship, monogamous relationship, don't want a relationship romantically, I don't care. There are some gems in this book. So if you're listening and you're like, oh my gosh, not into open relationships, that's fine. Still check out the book because there are some incredible pieces of wisdom in there. But those are the books that I found to be especially helpful when it comes to the topic of jealousy in my own journey. And so there's going to be some moments in here where I reference those books, such as right now. So in the book Opening Up, there's someone named Owen who talks about jealousy and what jealousy means to him. And the quote is, I think of jealousy as the warning light on your dashboard. It tells you something is wrong, but doesn't tell you what to do about it. When you feel jealousy, it means it's time to pull over and assess what is going on and then do something about it. And that's how I tend to think about jealousy too. Jealousy is not good or bad. Jealousy just is. And it's a signal from our lizard brain that is trying to communicate something to our conscious mind. Our emotions are trying to communicate with us something that is going on beneath the surface. And I think it's helpful to figure out what's going on beneath the surface, because most of the time when we make decisions throughout our life, it's the subconscious brain that's making the decision. When I think about my past jealousies and when I look at jealousies pop up in other people, I do see common themes or common thought fallacies. We're going to get into a little more of the details about different themes of jealousy. But I think that ultimately it comes down to this first theme, and it is insecurity or fear. Most feelings of jealousy are insecurity. This is going first because it's going to show up in the rest of the examples, as well as fear. If there is something you feel insecure around in yourself or in your relationship, or you have doubts of your worth or your safety or your commitment in relationships, then jealousy is more likely to pop up. Insecurities are going to also come up throughout our life. Life changes, life evolves. Our feelings and our insecurities and our fears change and evolve. Like everything I say in today's episode, the key is to be aware of it and consistently get underneath it. Consistently fill yourself up with self-love, self-acceptance, and self-celebration to counteract the insecurity and hopefully to release the insecurity that comes up for you. Fear of abandonment is also another big one for people. And I think in the similar to insecurity, it's the root in fear. Maybe it's the fear of the unknown, or fear of things changing, or fears of being on your own, or fears of not being enough, or fears of not being chosen, and so on and so on. And I think that this can indicate mostly a lack of trust within yourself, but maybe also a lack of trust in the relationship or the other person. Or maybe it's a relationship from the past that's being projected onto the relationship now. But I think that in the case of fear of abandonment, there's an opportunity to get curious around, is there also a lack of trust here? And investigate that. Has your partner given you any reason to distrust them? If they have, what have you and your partner set up to remedy that, to counteract that? When I think of this particular fear, I know that we can try and convince ourselves that, oh, they're never going to leave us, things are never going to end, and we can try and commit to that thought. And I do think it's helpful to lean into trust, but this is going to seem a little counteractive or counterintuitive rather. But any relationship could end at any moment for any reason. And you can't control the circumstances. You can only control and equip yourself to be able to handle any of the circumstances that come your way, and to know that you have the tools and the resilience to get through it, that you're going to be okay no matter what, that you're in your corner no matter what, and you have your side no matter what. And so while I do think it's important to drop into trust with your partner and work on maybe if you have any of those trust issues pop up, I do think it's important to drop into that. But more importantly, I think it's important to drop into the trust that you have with yourself and really develop that self-trust muscle that you're going to be okay no matter what, and you have the skills and you have the resiliency, because not only is that the thing your brain can actually latch onto, that's also the thing that's actually way more within your control than whether a relationship will continue or end. I think when most people think about jealousy, it's this next theme, the comparison, or being envious of someone or something. And it basically boils down to you want something that you think someone else has, or that you think you don't have. I think this could be a trait, it could be a physical appearance, it could be characteristics, a job, a lifestyle, but it's comparison. You're comparing what you have to what they have. And it can make you feel, all those insecurities, all those fears. But if this comes up for you, I would recommend you direct the attention back to yourself. How can you work on yourself? How can you nourish your own life and your own relationships? How can you celebrate what you have and enjoy it, treasure it? How can you stay in your lane? Because you're more likely to create the life that you actually want if you stay in your lane. Everyone else's lane has traffic, right? Because they're not your lane. So how can you nourish your own life, and how can you be clear about what it is that you actually want in your life? Oftentimes we compare because we think that we're meant to have something that society tells us, or it's insecurity, or it's fear, right? Going back to the other themes. I can remember a few years ago where I was really envious of another woman, and I was envious of the attention she got, and I kept thinking to myself, I wish I was mysterious, or I wish that I was as poised. And she had this really captivating, siren-like quality to her. And I beat myself up because of that a lot, because I'm kind of like a bubbly ball, right? I'm sweet and I'm spicy sometimes, and I enjoy going deep with people, but we were two very different people. But I kept looking at the lack. I kept looking at and comparing what I had to what she had. And when I finally started to recognize and celebrate my own qualities, and when I recognized my own gifts, that's when I dropped into who I was. And not only did my relationship flourish, but my self-esteem flourished too, because I wasn't seeing the lack, I was seeing the gratitude, and I was seeing the acceptance of myself. Next, we're going to get into possessiveness, oh my goodness, and or the desire to control. And I think this is going to be one for people that we hate to admit, including myself, but I think it's important. Sometimes fear drives us to want to control other people, to put up rules around what it is that people can and can't do, because we think that will make our jealousy go away. And to get into this topic, we do kind of have to establish some basic things. And the first basic thing that we have to establish is people are not objects and they cannot be owned. Just because you're dating someone, you don't get to control them. You get to have boundaries. You get to make agreements in your relationship. You get to state what feels good, what doesn't feel good, and set up a structure that supports that in communication with your partner, but you don't get to possess your partner. You can desire, I hit the mic then. You can desire and want a certain amount of time or attention from your partner, but you aren't actually entitled to it. And I think this is important because I think when jealousy pops up, the desire is to try and control. The desire is to try and tell our partner what they can or can't do, or rather guilt them or shame them into doing or not doing something. And I'll tell you right now, you may think that this creates safety in your relationship, but it doesn't. It doesn't. Possessiveness or controlling a partner might make you feel safe or in control, but it's a false sense of safety. It makes your partner, oftentimes, I can imagine, feel stifled or even a lack of safety within the relationship, because ultimately it's a signal to your partner that you don't trust them and you don't believe them and you don't believe what they are telling you or showing you. I also want to go back to that Hollywood trope, right? There's a lot of romance wrapped up in jealousy that comes back to this particular point of controlling or possessing another person. This is a Hollywood trope that I see play out so much. A woman gets mad at another woman for talking to her man, even though the other woman never knew that she was in a relationship with him. They get into a catfight, which, everyone laughs at, or it sells tickets. But it's still a physical altercation. It's still assault. A man is controlling a woman, There's a man talking to a woman. It's his woman. He confronts the other man. They go outside. They get into a fight. These are things that we see in movies. The love triangle, right? Two people fighting over one person because they're jealous, because possessiveness, because insert any reason here. Hollywood dresses up this toxicity with sparkles, and we don't blink twice at it because we're used to it, because we expect it in these tropes nowadays, even though it is toxic and unhealthy. And if we saw it play out in real life, it wouldn't feel good, and it would be a major red flag. So that's where I say, like, I think there's a lot of things in terms of jealousy that can be learned. All right, moving on. I know we have a few. I said masterclass in and of itself. This is going to be a longer podcast today, folks, but it's an important one. So feeling excluded or left out. This one gets me, okay? This is probably the one that leads me to feeling the most jealous often. The sense of feeling left out or excluded or feeling second best or all of those things. Sometimes I do this to myself. Sometimes I make up this whole story that I'm being left out and end up leaving myself out of things. But in the book, More Than Two, there were some really great points that were made about what society has normalized when it comes to us not being included in certain things. So, for example, we feel comfortable with people going to work or running errands, but if they are spending time with friends or they are doing a hobby, a sense of feeling left out can come up. And the author points out that it isn't really about people doing things without us. Only certain things, usually social situations. Maybe it's because of a sense of social status, or maybe it's because you don't want to miss out on the fun things. But when I read this, a huge light bulb went off in my head because it was so true. I don't get upset about my friends going to work, but if they're all hanging out without me, then that pang comes up, that green-eyed monster starts to bubble up. And what I hear a lot too from people, from clients, is this whole thing as well of I don't want to go, but I want to be invited. And I think that indicates as well the desire to be accepted or loved or thought of, or to have some sense of social status in relationships. So here's what has helped me personally and what I think is helpful for others. Ask yourself, what are you making it mean about you if you're not invited? What are you making it mean about other people? Because there are plenty of times that I wasn't included, but it simply was because I wasn't local to an area, or it was a spur of the moment thing that came up and I was out of town. And it doesn't mean that I wasn't cared about. And even if they didn't care about me, so what? What was I making it mean about me that other people didn't care? Did I make it mean that I was unlovable or unworthy or not interesting? When I got curious about that, I was actually able to look underneath of the insecurities that I had and kind of resolve those a lot more and release the story, let go of the story a little bit more. Something else that helped me was taking control over my social calendar and prioritizing people. And also making a big effort to create an environment and a culture within my relationships where other people felt loved and included. My last one here before we get into dealing with jealousy and letting go of jealousy is resentment or holding grudges. And resentment comes up when we believe someone has wronged us. And it comes up when we are trying to keep score about what we're doing versus another person and how much we're showing up to a relationship versus them and what we do versus what they do. And I think that it also comes up with people pleasing. When we go along with what someone else is wanting or what we think is going to make someone else happy, but secretly we don't want to do it or it doesn't feel good. And we don't verbalize what we're feeling and what we want and what is okay and not okay for us, which eventually all will catch up with us. And the solution to this is simple, but it might not feel easy. It's to express yourself. It's to share things as they come up, even if it feels difficult, even if it feels scary, because these things do have a tendency to build up. And when they build up, that's when jealousy comes out, especially if we feel like we're doing more in a relationship than the other person. So, how do we deal with all of this? I've got 5 steps for you today in terms of how to move through jealousy. And if you haven't listened to episode 3 of the Shift Your Story podcast, how to stop doing things you shouldn't do in your relationships, I would recommend listening to that one because it gets into a technique called APA, which I think is going to be very helpful for you as we go through our next steps. The first one is be aware. Be aware of what you're feeling. Build up that awareness muscle. Keep inventory of what is going on beneath the surface. Be honest with yourself as well. Oftentimes we try and lie to ourselves about what we're feeling, but reflect, get introspective, write it down, journal, meditate, but start to build that awareness muscle. The second thing is validate your emotions, validate your feelings. Don't make yourself wrong for feeling jealousy or shame. It's not going to help you. It's just going to keep you stuck. And remember, it's okay to feel those things. They're just feelings. They're not good or bad. It's what we do with those feelings that matters. The third is to get to the root. Examine the triggers. Examine the things that rubbed your emotions, that rubbed these thoughts the wrong way. Figure out what the specific thoughts were, or the actions that triggered this, or the events that led to these series of emotions. What are you afraid of? What outcome are you trying to avoid? What are you feeling insecure around, or fear around, or envy around? Get curious and then talk about it. Share it. Receive support. Maybe that's in relationship to another person, like the person you're in relationship with, or maybe it's to an outside source that doesn't have anything to do with this situation, who is a safe person, But jealousy thrives on secrecy. Letting people into what's going on can greatly expedite the moving through jealousy process, because it can give you clarity as well on where other people are at and what's coming up for them. Or, talking about it with a safe person. I'm thinking like a coach or a therapist here, like someone who's not going to go around and gossip. Talking it out with them can help give you an honest mirror reflection back. And then finally, practice the self-soothing and the feeling secure techniques that you have, especially, go listen to podcast 3, but practice the self-soothing and feeling secure. You become good at what you practice. So practice the regulation, practice thinking and believing new thoughts that are going to get you closer to what you want to feel and experience in your life. Practice trust, practice self-love, practice self-celebration, practice acceptance, practice all of these things, because it's going to be so much more helpful for you. So those are the 5 steps. I'm going to go through them one more time. Number 1, be aware. 2, validate the emotions. 3, get to the root. 4, talk about it and receive support. And 5, practice the self-soothing techniques and feeling secure. So, what should your partner do when it comes to your jealousy? Or what should you do if your friend or partner or whoever is feeling jealous? So while I do think it is our responsibilities as people to take ownership of our emotions, including jealousy, it doesn't mean our partners have to be assholes about it. And I say that with love, but really, just because I think it's our responsibility to deal with the emotions, it doesn't mean that I think your partner should do nothing. I think that as a partner myself, I want to support my partner as much as possible, while also staying in integrity with my values and also the values of his and the values of our relationship together. So keeping the relationship as healthy as possible is kind of like the root for me, but that doesn't mean that I can't show up and support. Some feelings of jealousy just require assurance. Some require adjustments of boundaries. But whatever I feel is integrity for me as a partner to do, I will do. And I think that as a partner, if your partner is feeling jealous, or your friend or whoever, I would encourage you to validate your emotions, even if they don't feel logical, because all of our feelings are valid. It's just what we do with those feelings. And that can be as simple as saying, hey, your feelings are valid. I hear you're feeling this way. I hear you're feeling thought of when I go out with my friends, and I can see that that's causing you some distress. I see that. I hear you. Holding space for someone means witnessing and giving someone the space to safely express their emotions and allow themselves to be seen in those emotions. And so ultimately, as a partner, I think that we have the ability to hold space for other people. and allow them to express what they're feeling without making it mean anything about us and that we should do something different at that particular time. Maybe it does mean a renegotiation of boundaries or expectations or anything like that, but the initial moment is holding space. After that, you can decide how much it is in integrity with yourself, your partner, and the relationship to adjust things. But the initial is holding space and hearing your partner out and giving reassurance if you can and if it's in integrity to do so. Here are some of the red flags, though. Because I think that while jealousy comes up for us as people, that doesn't mean that the relationship or the behaviors of another person is squeaky clean. And so here's kind of the things to look out for if your partner is not actually giving you the reassurance or not treating you with kindness and compassion. So some of the red flags around your partners in jealousy is if they just minimize your emotions and they say, oh, it's just jealousy or you're just being emotional or, whatever. I would invite you to really think about if you are being listened to and if you are being allowed into that other person's world and perspective, or if they're just saying you're being emotional and you're being belittled and dismissed. I think if someone lacks empathy or compassion, who brushes off your fears or isn't willing to talk to you about the jealousy, I think that's a red flag. Perhaps your partner isn't actually setting aside enough time for you or being as affectionate as they can. And I think in these cases, that's something to talk to your partner about. But sometimes our insecurity or our fear is all built up in our imagination and we project it. So that's where I think that as a partner, if your partner is feeling jealous, it's also an opportunity for you to get curious and for you to get introspective and for you to really look at your life, your thoughts, your behaviors, and see how much of their fears or their jealousy might actually be warranted, and if there's something that is within your control and is within integrity to change that. All right, y'all. A longer podcast today, but filled with lots of juicy information. Definitely go and check out those 2 books. I think they're definitely in my top book recommendations for relationships in general. Regardless of whether you operate monogamously or polyamorously or whatever in relationships, these are helpful books. They hold so many gems around tools in relationships. I really recommend them. So go and check them out. We definitely utilize them as a resource in this podcast today. So thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, if you want to see anything particular come up, any topics on this podcast come up, definitely reach out to me, email me, message me on Instagram, all of that good stuff. But in the meantime, I'll catch you on the next episode. Take care, everybody. Bye.
So make whatever change you need to make.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If something resonated with you in today's episode, if you could leave a review, I would greatly appreciate it. It helps other people learn what we're all about here at Shift Your Story, and it helps this podcast reach listeners who may need to hear what it is that we have to say. If you would like to connect with me or work with me, you can visit my website at www.shiftyourstory.net. You can also find all of my socials on there so you can connect with me in the way that works best for you. I'll see you next time.